Hey, what's going on? This is going to be a quick setup and demonstration of Amazon web servers and basically how to set up an Ubuntu instance. So we're going to go with a Linux instance over a Windows instance, which is better in my opinion because the Windows instance tends to have a lot more resources being used just by Windows being Windows, and the Ubuntu instance can run very lightly. You could have multiple game instances running multiple game servers. You can also host your own websites on there, and generally it just works a lot better. It does mean, however, that you will have to learn a few terminal commands, but there are plenty guides online to cover all of this. Right, so I've gone ahead and I've created a brand new AWS user over here. I've gone through the whole verification procedure and whatnot. And now I am on Amazon's EC2. So if you search just AWS EC2, not ECS, EC2, and it's this one over here. So it's Elastic Cloud Computing 2, and the benefit of this is that it works on an elastic IP situation where instead of having one static IP address, and this is how we always point a domain at a specific server instance, Amazon has some clever things going on in the background to allow us to use basically like a virtual static IP that will always point to our server instance, which is great for us. So back over here at the dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and start a launch instance. And Amazon has got a great free tier product where you can create two free servers, one being a Linux one and one being a Windows one. And you've got this privilege basically up to a year, and you could get a dual core with 1 GB of RAM as far as I remember. I'm just trying to find this one. Okay, so we're going to go with the Ubuntu server 18.04 since that's the latest one there. And we're going to make sure that it does say free tier eligible here. You don't want to be caught with charges by AWS, and this does happen. You may run into, whilst you're setting up, you're transferring back and forth, that the transfer amounts go outside of the free tier allocations. And I mean, so far I've been charged the maximum of $4 in a whole month, and that was a heavy usage. So it's really not that bad. But just be aware that there are other hidden costs that they don't tell you about. And that's just to do with usage and also visitors from outside of your local region. So I'm on the Cape Town region over here, and because of that, it uses a different token system different token system from the European and the US regions. So any visitors from those regions cost a different set of tokens. It's all very confusing. But the support is very helpful, and if you do have issues that you've been charged like $20 or whatever, they are more than willing to refund you that for the first time as well, which I found quite nice. So I've selected the T3 Micro, free eligible. Notice that it was ticked on this one as at first, but we're going to use this one. We have 2 virtual CPUs, 1 GB of RAM, and yep, decent network, cool. Let's see, did we add storage? Okay, so storage by default is going to come with 8 gigs. That's great. The security groups here, we will go and edit this after the fact. So we do have SSH access here, which we will use to get access to our terminal. Yeah, so basically all the default settings are fine. Just make sure that you're on the free tier eligible options there. And now it's going to ask you to create a key pair. So this key pair is basically your key to the door of accessing your server. So I'm going to go create a new key pair. I'm just going to give it and I'm going to go download that key pair and launch instance. Okay, so I'm going to go view the instance now, and it's busy creating it, as you can see here. So what we can do in the meantime, though, is convert this PEM file into a P12 file for Putty. So we're going to use Putty as our SSH client. So this Putty here, we actually need the Putty gen. So we're going to launch Putty gen over here. I'm going to go and load, find my new PEM file. You're going to change this over here. Find that, open it, successfully imported. Okay, we're going to save it out into the Putty gen file, which is actually ppk. No, the private key. Save the private key over here. Okay, so I should have the ppk file ready to go now. Yes, I do. Okay, so now I want to go and create a new session over here. Or I want to connect to my instance here. Okay, now it's all running over here. We want to first set up the Elastic IP. Let's go set up Elastic IP. We're going to allocate one. We're going to just take one from Amazon's pool. That's great. Okay, we now have one. We need to assign it to one of our network interfaces. So we're going to go and say associate the IP over here. And under instance, we can just select the one that's running there and associate. Okay, now our Elastic IP address is now associated to the private IP address. So this private IP could change at any moment. And so AWS in the background is looking at the network interface ID rather, and then making sure that our Elastic IP always points there. Okay, if we go down to instances, back to instances, now our public IP address over here, this is our public IP. Let's copy that. And we can, or no, we're not going to copy that. We're going to copy the public DNS address over here. And we're going to go ahead and paste that in there. Let's give it a name and save. So now with Putty, it's a little bit weird. If you click on one of these, it doesn't actually load up the details. You have to click it and then press load, and then it'll load up the details like so. Now you can see that the address there does match. And now at the bottom over here, once we've loaded the correct host name over here, we are using port 22, which you'll recall from the security groups just now. And under SSH, we expand that, go down to auth, and here we need to put in that private key file. So we can press browse and go find that file over there. And I'm just going to go back and save that once more just so that it remembers my key. Otherwise, you're going to have to put this in every single time. And I'm going to press open. So it's going to ask you the first time if you trust it. Say yes, of course. And now the username is always Ubuntu for that. Okay, there we go. I'm in. This is now my Ubuntu instance here. Can't really zoom in. Oh well. Okay, so what we can do right off the bat is if we type in htop, and press enter, we get a nice little breakdown of all the tasks that are currently being run. We can see we have a gigabyte of RAM over there. We're currently using 118 megs, and our CPU load is on 0 and 0.7 respectively. Okay, so that is access to our terminal, basically, how to run things. But now we need also access to copy things over to our server instance. So for that, we're going to have to set up SFTP, or we can actually just add in the same ppk file using WinSCP. So you can use WinSCP to allow this. I'm going to go create a new site here, and it's going to be We're going to use SFTP, and you'll notice now that there is port number 22 here. So we actually need to go to our security groups, and we find the one that's currently being used, which is the Launch Wizard one, which we have the SSH access on port 22, which is great because that is exactly what we're going to be using. Cool. Okay, so then we need the same host name, so we can go and copy that one again, paste that in there. And now here we don't need, oh well, we can put in Ubuntu here because that's going to be the username. But what we really want to do is assign that same key. So we're going to go to Advanced, go to Authentication, and we're going to load up this key over here, the same one that we have done before. So this AWS tutorial one. And we're going to press OK and save this. Okay, we have that one there, and we're going to press Login. Yes, we want that. Okay, great. Now we are in the home directory of our Ubuntu user. So say we were to go and create a file over here, test.txt, and this is going to save that. WinSCP will pump that up to the server there, completed. Now we have the text file there, as we can see. So if we were to go and check over here, to cancel or to go out of any sort of applications that are taking up your whole terminal, you can press Control-C or Command-C if you're on Mac. And now if we type in ls, we can list all the files in our current folder. And there we have our test.txt file over there. Great. Okay, so now what do we do once we've got this all set up and now we want to host a game server? So we build something with Unity, we use networking solutions like Mirror, and we need a server to be running on our AWS server. Great. So in your Mirror setup, you would have set up a particular port to use. So that port needs to be opened on the security groups here. So we need to go over here. On the networking manager, we have the telepathy transport over here with a port number. So that port number is the 7777 is the default one. We can just use that. That's not an issue. But that port number we need to open up then on our server there. So if we go to edit the inbound rules, we're going to add a new one. And yes, custom TCP custom TCP port range is just going to be 7777. And we're just going to go to anywhere. Okay, save that. And now 7777 is open for us to actually use effectively. So in our project over here, now this network IP address, we're going to change that. This is now going to be the IP address on our server. So if we go back over here to instances, we can copy that IP address over there, pop that in there, and now we're ready to build here. So go Control-Shift-B, and you might find that you don't have Linux support there. Right, easy fix. Go over to Unity Hub, go over to Installs, go to the version that you're currently working with, add modules, Linux build support. And that will go and download that. And once that's done, you will have to restart your Unity project. So we just close that one real quick and go and open it again. But this time I'm going to change the platform from here and just change it to Linux and open that up. While that's opening up, I do want to show you something. Under the instance settings over here, there is an option there, change T to T3 unlimited. So I was unfortunately caught out with this. where one of my server instances managed to get into, I think it was a memory leak, and it just kept chowing and chowing and chowing, and eventually it caused my server to be using a lot more server resources than was initially allowed. And AWS has this feature for unlimited access to increased power based on your server's usage. So if your server instance has a memory leak and you're not aware of it, 12 hours it's been running at maximum CPU thresholds, it's going to start charging you. So you want to make sure that this is disabled from the get-go. If you do go into a production environment where this is actually now making you some money, then you definitely want to have unlimited on just to keep the player experience at the top. And you want to make sure that you test a lot to make sure that it can't ever go into one of those downward spirals. Okay, I think, yes, it's loaded now. We are now on Linux, great stuff. And we're going to do a server build over here. Let's just make sure our auto connect, yep, it'll sort that stuff out. We do have start on headless, which means that the server will boot up in its own go as long as server build is checked as true. Great, so we're going to build that, and I'm just going to go build. And just call this let that build out. That shouldn't take too long to build. And then we can upload that to the server and run it. Cool, our build is done now. So let's upload that using WinSCP. So we use WinSCP to upload our files. We're going to just go and create, we can just copy that whole folder. Just going to drop that entire folder over there. That's going to go and upload each individual file. If we look here, when you're rebuilding your project, keeping these 4 files is totally fine. What does need to be rebuilt are these shared assets files over here and any other resources that gets added to your build. These are quite standard over here. And let's see how big was that. So 70 megs for the server build, roughly. And this is like without any content. You could zip this and then upload it and then unzip it through the command line. But that is extra steps. Okay, it's finished uploading finally. We can go back to our Putty instance, so our terminal here. And now if we type ls again, now we get a blue folder over here. We can use the command cd to change directory into build. If you press tab, it'll auto-complete the rest of the name. Very useful. Now we type ls again, we can see all the files that are in there. And what we're very interested in is this specific file over here, because this is the executable. This is what's going to run the server. But we need to do one thing before that. Since this was coming from a Windows operating system, these files will not be marked as executable by default. So what we need to do is use the sudo command line and then chmod. So we're changing permissions or properties of these files. We're going to add executable to everything, so plus X, and we're going to do star. So star just means is a wildcard. It means everything inside of this folder. So you need to make sure, first of all, that you are inside of the folder of the build, that you then use the sudo keyword to get basically admin access. We're using chmod to modify the properties. We're adding executable to every single file within this folder. I'm going to press enter. It's going to take a second just to do that. Okay, and now if we do ls, we can see that these files are now green. which green is good. Great stuff. So now, how do we run that specific file? Well, dot slash, and then you can type in the name of your build, press tab to autocomplete. Now, if you double tap tab, it says, okay, there's more than one named that, so you can just do the dot, and it'll autocomplete the rest of that. We press enter. Okay, server is now running. We can see there server build. And now if we go back to Unity and just make sure, yes, our IP address is in there, and we run this, we immediately get straight to the lobby, which means that it is working. If I were to cancel this with Control C and run this again, it's going to time out over here. Okay, you see, now we couldn't join the server. So if you go up arrow, you get all the history, and down arrow as well. So I'm going to press enter again, and now my server's running, and we can clearly see, yes, it is indeed working. Okay, now when you're dealing with multiple server instances or different game servers that are being run on here, the easiest way to manage all of that is by using basically a virtual terminal. So there's a command called tmux, so tmux. This will open up basically a virtual terminal here. Now, from here, we have a few commands. So if you go Control B and then down arrow, or no, Control B, Shift, what they call quotation marks. So Control B, Shift, quotation mark, then you can split the screen like so. Now there are a bunch of commands. You can just Google tmux commands to really get used to them. But this really helps. Just split the session here so that at the bottom here I can do htop so that I can always see my usage here. Then I can go Control B up arrow to move into one of the other sections here. I can see where I am, and I'm going to run the mirror instance here. And if I were to go down here as well, I could, if I had another game server, I could do the same thing. I'm just going to run the exact same thing twice here. And now we have double servers, two servers running here, two server instances, which would get confusing for your applications because they're all looking for the same IP address. If you wanted to have multiple game instances, then you would need to have kind of one master application that can receive all the connections and then reroute that connection to one of your sub instances. But yeah, okay, so tmux, to get back to it, there's a command called tmux space -a. So I'm actually just going to demonstrate that real quick. So I go and open up, not WinSCP, I open up Putty. I go and load my settings over here, go open, type in the username, Ubuntu. And now if I want to get back to that section or that session, I can go tmux -a or just tmux -a. And now it connects me straight back to that session that I had there. Yeah, so that's about it. Control B space. You can also change your layouts. That's quite nice. There are tons of different shortcuts and commands you can use, but that is the basics of setting up your AWS server and loading a game server on there.